Good morning and welcome to ISPA reopening town hall number 6. We're going to wait a few minutes just to let everyone get logged into the system. We're so glad you're here with us today. It'll be Hello, Allison.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Oh, yay, I'm so sorry. I was just finishing another meeting. I apologize.
We're glad you're here. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Do you mind muting your microphone until we speak?
Of course.
Thank you. Allison, you're still unmuted. Hello and welcome to another edition of the ISPA Reopening Town Hall Series. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today our conversation is going to focus around the guest experience, from the beginning of that experience to the end of that experience. And we have another excellent crew of panelists who will share their reopening insights and experiences with us today. As we've mentioned during previous town halls, we've sought out panelists involved with spas that are open and accepting guests so they can share their real-world, boots-on-the-ground observations as we all work to reopen our spas and beyond. So before we begin with another fantastic discussion, I really want to thank today's sponsors of this great town hall, Eminence Organic Skincare and Body Bliss. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your support. We can't have these town halls without our great resource partners. And near the end of this conversation, they're going to be giving away some fantastic prizes and products, courtesy of both their companies, so stick around till the end. So before we start, a few housekeeping items. My name is Patrick Huey. I am the Corporate Spa Director for Montage International. I also have the honor of serving on the ISPA board. So I'm going to be hosting this call today. Also, please make sure that you mute your microphone so that we can hear the great advice of our panelists. Also, we have a chat feature in your Zoom, so please use that to send your questions in. We love your questions. We also love the questions from the Facebook Live family as well. And make sure that you check us out again. We do record these sessions, so if you have to step away or a friend can't make it, they can also see the information from today's conversation. Finally, we do bring in a multiple set of people with different views, different companies, different opinions, so that you can have a wide array view of what's happening within our industry, and you can pick and choose what works best for your business, your city, your jurisdiction, your state. With that, let's move on to our discussion with our panelists. So panelists, as you answer your first question, please share your name, the name of your spa, and how long you have been open. So I'm gonna start with you, Deidre.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Strunk. I'm the Vice President of Canyon Ranch. We've been open about 5 weeks. It's been really exciting, actually, to be reopened.
Well, thank you so much, Deidre. So, Deirdre, on our previous town halls, we've heard that time needs to be set aside for longer conversations with guests when over-the-phone bookings are made. What information are guests most often sharing and seeking, and why is that phone call happening in a longer time frame?
It's a great question. So absolutely more time is needed. And really it's from our end. You know, people aren't inquiring as much as I thought they would about sanitation. We're telling them about masks, what facilities are open and not open, and kind of what to expect during their journey. But really the time is really more allowed for us to explain what their journey is going to be like versus them asking a lot of questions. It's pretty interesting. I think that, you know, the guests really trust the brand, and so I think because of that, they know that we have a lot of you know, sanitation procedures in place.
That's great. That's great. And if you are getting any questions about sanitation, what do those questions tend to look like if they do ask?
I think the biggest question that they talk about is masks. they were not mandatory when we first opened, but they are mandatory now. It happened about a week and a half ago. So that's been a question if they have to wear it during their entire service, mostly during the massage, of course. They want to know if they have to wear it face down.
And is that answer a yes or a no?
Yes. Yes.
And have you had any guests who have decided not to book because you have to wear the mask face down or wear the mask in the spa?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yes. And or people that have come in and then they refuse to want to have to wear it during the service, and then we cancel services.
And how,
we just don't bet on that. It was a procedure that we had in place before it was mandatory, and we as a company, a brand, just would not flex on that.
And I do think we have to draw the line in the sand in some places to keep our staff safe and to keep our guests safe. So I think that's great. Thank you, Deirdre. So Jim, I come to you with the same question about the reservations process. We do hear that it takes longer. You may have a different point of view on that. So I'm very excited to hear your opinion about that.
So welcome, ISPA. I'm Jim Root. I am the general manager of Miyamo and the Enchantment Group director of Wellbeing. And we currently have 3 resorts that are open, 2 in Arizona and 1 in Virginia. So I would agree almost exclusively what Deirdre said. We on our website have a very extensive posting of well-being standards that explains our process across the resort in every department. And so we have not seen an increase in the call time, but what we have seen is that there's more demand than there is supply. And our biggest challenge is, from a therapist standpoint, the very, very intimate nature of the service. But we also have always required masks, and it's a line in the sand. It's a no-go. If you don't want to wear the mask, then we'll find an alternative option for you. We're also doing temperature scans. So any spa guest, they have to have a temperature under 100.4. And again, if they refuse that, that's a no-go as well.
And have you had guests refuse the mask or the temperature?
Yes. And we'll do multiple readings, so 3 or 4 readings just to see, but we've never had a false turn into a positive, if you would. And so there's probably been less than, we've been open actually since May 15th. We've probably seen less than 20, one way or the other, say, no, I don't want to do that. And so then we come up with a different solution for it.
Understood. I know for Montage and our properties, which have been open since the beginning of June, we've turned away 3 people this issue. So most guests seem to have really embraced the concept of masks and temperature and understand the reasoning why we are doing that. So Allison, I come to you with the same question. I know you have many spas that are probably open. If you could tell us where you're from, your business, and how long your spas have been open, that would be fantastic.
Of course. I'm Allison. I'm with Spavia. I'm a founder along with my husband. We have about 50 locations, all but 2 right now are open. I echo again what Jim and Deirdre said. It really is a non-negotiable. Everybody wears a mask. We have a process with our cleaning document. When a guest enters one of our locations, we take a temperature. We have a box of masks there. We have a little table that is set with sanitation. So the process by which we do it is they enter, we welcome them. We do the hand over the heart in terms of, you can't hug anymore. So that's one way that we get around that hug. And then once the temperature is taken, we actually will sanitize both their hands. We use Clean Republic. So it's a spritz on each hands. We spray ours. If they have a mask, great. If they don't, we present them with a mask. At the end of the day, we're in this together. And I think that as a society and now seeing the spikes, people know this is important. And we are here to take care of them. We are here for their mental health and physical well-being, but we have to help them understand that this is real, and our team's safety and our guest safety is paramount. So that, I think, goes without saying. And then lastly is COVID questions. We let them know that we will be asking them 3 questions. We sanitize our iPads. We then present it to them. We are very open in terms of how we sanitize and physically letting them see it. We also have a slew of marketing materials upon entrance in our retreat rooms, in our restrooms, just so that they know what we have. We have even in our lockers, this has been sanitized. So there's a whole process, every area of the spa in terms of communication, but it represents our brand and it's done very tastefully. So people aren't, with something plastered on the wall of, these are the rules, but it's done very tastefully.
Are you seeing longer scheduling times in the reservation process?
A little bit, and some of that comes with the expectation of how far in advance. Each jurisdiction is different, and with multiple locations, you can imagine we get a slew of a variety of things. But in general, it's explaining that this is their appointment time. Please arrive at X time, and then they'll receive a text message reminder. So there's been a few tweaks even within how we communicate. Because there does need to be, and maybe it's a few sentences more, but then asking if they have any questions, whereby then maybe there's a little bit more length in time of that reservation process. But it's important to make sure that they feel comfortable and to ask those questions.
Thank you, that's great. And Simon, I come to you now on the length of time in the reservation process. What are you seeing there in your location? And please share where you're from and how long you've been open. That'd be great.
Sure. I'm Simon Markser. I'm with Miraval Group. We have several locations, some open, some yet to open. But what we've seen from the properties that have opened is that it is a bit longer process. Interestingly enough, it's less about the granularity about precautions or specifics as much as it is trying to identify if the experience is going to be what folks are looking for. That's a huge part of I think what people are calling to try to understand is the experience going to be what I've come to to know my spa experience is going to be like, and less of being again about the granularity about exactly what precautions or how things are being done, and more what is the feel is and quite honestly a very touching piece is the concern about the folks that are there and they've either connected with before and the well-being of our service providers. So I think it's been more about trying to capture the essence of the experience than it has necessarily been about any specific precaution or measures taken.
I think that's great. I think oftentimes, for Montage, we have seen a longer reservations process. We do get the granular questions at some point, but we also have created what's called a peace of mind commitment, which we share with each guest who books a spa service so that we can take them through what to expect when they come into the spa so there are no surprises. But I do think that reservations process should be about creating an essence and an experience for the guests before they come to your property and using that time, whatever time it takes for each guest, and it may vary, to do that. I want to come back to you, Simon, on this question, and I'll take this to all of you as well. We're getting questions about if we have to cancel a reservation because a guest refuses to wear a mask or have their temperature taken, or they show a fever when they come to the spa, are we charging that guest, and how are we compensating the therapist if they lose that appointment? So Simon, I'll come to you with that particular question right now.
Sure, yeah. We have made the decision not to charge the guest, but compensate the therapist. And essentially we have, an agreement with our providers that within a certain time frame, if that appointment has not canceled, that we are going to commit to making them whole for that time that they have, in essence, it has been reserved, right? For their time has been reserved, and therefore it should be there should be compensation associated with it. But I think as I think Deidre mentioned, it is a partnership, and part of the support that I think is critical to emphasize is support for our guest experience, but also for our staff experience. And that's one of the ways I think to demonstrate a level of support for our team and all that they are encountering in order to come to work and deliver an unparalleled experience.
That's a great response. Deidre, I have the same question for you. How are you handling that compensation should a guest have to be refused a service for whatever reason? at this
Yeah.
current time.
We're not charging the guests either, and we're compensating the therapists. You know, like Simon said, it's about partnership. We're not wanting to upset either side, and it's important that, again, we're all in it together and we can do the best we can for the guests and the employee. You know, it's just not worth it.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Deidre. And Jim, how are you guys handling it for your properties?
Same thing, third time's the charm, right? So no charge to the guest. We pay the therapist their fee for service, but there's no gratuity. And we go from there with it.
That's great. And Allison, for your properties?
Likewise, all the same. You know, yes, they are out that gratuity, but at the end of the day, to expose somebody that could potentially be sick, it's just not worth the risk. And so we take that on. Our locations are franchised, so that is part of their decision to make. But collectively, that is the feedback that we received, is the guest is not charged and the specialist is paid.
And when you're in a franchise model like that, Allison, how are you able to impact that kind of policy from a corporate level? Because I think there may be some franchisees and franchisors on the phone, and I know there can sometimes be that tension between home office and the field. So what was your process in getting your franchisees to embrace that concept of paying for the service, even if they haven't taken in the revenue from it because of this situation?
I think it depends on the franchise, the circumstance. I think it's a lot of one-on-one conversations with owners, especially if they have angst or reservation about it. So whether it's myself or Marty having a one-off conversation with an owner about the whys. You know, anything that we say in our company, there's always a why. And at the end of the day, it's the guest experience and making sure that our team is taken care of. So that for me personally, in terms of a founder-franchisee relationship, I think it's just important to have those one-off conversations and then town hall meetings if that's an important topic that it's discussed.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Of course.
I have a question about locker rooms. I'm seeing questions come through the feed about whether or not you're opening your locker rooms. And if you are, how are you incorporating that into the journey and keeping it safe? I'm going to come to you with that, Jim, first, in terms of, are your locker spaces open? Are your wet areas open? And are your guests using them? And how are you maintaining social distance? That's a lot of questions, but basically, are your amenities open? And if they are, how are you keeping your social distance policies in place there?
So yes, the lounges are open, but through a variety of things like different scheduling, we've been able to minimize the crunch of people at any one time. So that was the first thing. But obviously, everything basically had to be brought in, taken away. So there's nothing communal. And so we've actually increased the high touch component of service because it's an interaction with every guest every time. And so we have all of the stockpile things in the back, and depending on what people need, we'll do more guiding about who goes to what locker. And in terms of everything is cleaned after every use. The jacuzzi and sauna are available, but the steam room is not. And we also incorporate electrostatic diffusion in terms of there's a cleaning process and then a sanitizing process. And these electrostatic guns compress the cleansing part, or compress the sanitizing part. And that's been one of the most helpful things that we do.
That's great. That's great. And Simon, what about you? Are your locker areas and amenities open, or are they closed?
They're closed for the most part. In some of the states that we're in, that has been mandated by the county or the state. So it wasn't a decision. But essentially, they have remained closed in an effort to try to be as cautious as possible. We have some advantages also in that people have rooms to go change into and come, in their robes. So, and in addition, as Jim pointed out, really limiting the number of folks who are able to do services at specific times to prevent those sort of points of congestion. Has helped a great deal, but we have made the decision to keep the locker room areas largely closed. Steam saunas are accessible in some locations, with by a single person at a time with a 10-minute limit.
And if they are accessing your steam one person at a time, how much time are you allowing between those appointments, and how are you cleaning out those steam rooms at this point?
The steam rooms are essentially we have a disinfection process, as Jim identified the difference between cleaning and disinfecting and sanitizing, or is it new arenas for all of us. But we do not have the electrostatic, but we have a spray process that the attendants go through between each individual.
That's great. That's great. And Deidre, I'll come to you with the same question. How are you handling those amenity areas in terms of your locker, steam, sauna, et cetera?
So our locker room is open. The wet areas are not open. The relaxation lounges, the conservatory, and the wave room are all open. And again, we book all the appointments on an hour and 15, any 50-minute service. And that really helps with, again, staggering the guests, because we're having therapists come in at all different times. And so that's really helping the flow of the lounges and all the different areas where guests can be. And then we have, because we have so many areas of seating, we've, put just 2 seats together in like the conservatory, so they're distanced. And then in the actual locker rooms where the lounges are, we put signs, out of order signs, nice looking ones, of course, in certain areas. So then they rotate them after they spray them down, because we have electric magnetic sprayers too. And so once they spray them down, then they can move the sign to a different one. So it's really this sort of game of rotation, kind of the same thing that we do gym as well. And that really helps a lot.
I want to hold that thought on how you're booking your appointments. We're going to come back to that in just a minute, but I want to go to Allison and ask the same. Within your locations, are your amenities, steam, sauna, plunge pool, locker areas open right now?
It varies by location and jurisdiction. For the most part, open. We have showers. We don't have the saunas or steam rooms. So I think at this point I'm happy or blessed that we don't have that to deal with. But again, it really does come down to the scheduling piece. We, in our guest journey, our guest advisors actually lead the way. So they're opening the doors, they're opening as much as we can have the guests not touch a surface, except for that changing piece. It's been really, it's been great, because then she backtracks or he backtracks and will sanitize all those touch points again. And then creating just small marketing pieces, little tent cards, plastic tent cards that can also be sanitized. It says, this locker has been sanitized, the shower has been sanitized. And again, a whole protocol and just the cleaning process on a rotation.
That's great. That's great. And in Montage, we have closed all of our wet areas. We do leave our showers open. We do encourage all of our guests to shower before the treatment, and our lounges are still open. We've put in social distancing signs throughout the locker areas and the waiting areas, and that seems to have helped. And so far, we've had no pushback from the guests on this. I think they do understand the times that we are in. But I do want to talk about appointment booking. And Deidre, I'm going to come to you on this, because I think you probably have the biggest challenge. I know you're doing over 200 services on a weekend, which makes my mind boggle a little bit given the time that we're in right now. So how are you handling the appointment booking so that your facilities don't become overburdened with people? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we're starting them at 7:45, and then 8, and then 8:15, and just building the entire schedule out for the day based on that. So morning, mid, and then evening. And I can't tell I couldn't stress enough how much this has helped. It's very interesting, right, for the therapist, because we know that everyone's so used to picking up appointments on the top of the hour. So it's a definite switch for the therapist and something for them to get used to, but it's made a tremendous difference for cleaning, for if a guest calls and says, I want a 9 o'clock appointment, and you're like, oh, I can get you in at 8:45 or 9:15, they're not like, no way, I'm not coming at that time. They're flexing and coming at the time that we're asking them to. And I can't stress enough, if you're able to do it, I recommend it. It just, the staff feels really good about it. They feel like they have enough time to clean. We're asking our guests when they come in to wash their hands before they get onto the massage table. So it's really made a big difference in every aspect. Even, you'll notice even at your front desks that the check-in process is different, because we know that we tell everyone to come an hour ahead, but they kind of come whenever they want. But it's still, because of the time of their appointments, really makes the flow much different. So I give 2 thumbs up for an hour and 15 minutes time.
Are you doing 30 minutes between the services at this point, or are you keeping it at a 15 or 10-minute interval between treatments?
They have 25 minutes for every 50-minute service they have, and even 80. They have that extra time on the 80-minute as well. And so it really just makes a good balance for not having, it's even, when the therapists go to pick them up, there's only a few therapists picking up guests, and then there's only one therapist in the hallway at a time, or maybe 2 instead of 8, and so that's been really nice too.
I will say, I think too, we're currently doing 30 minutes between treatments, and I find that gives us time in the treatment room to go through the additional steps that we're taking to ensure the guest safety. So we're not watching the clock like hawks to finish at 11
Exactly.
on the dot. That gives you time to do the steps in the process and then clean afterwards. So I imagine it's very important when you have 200 guests coming through on a weekend.
And it feels like also that if anything is going on, or they're having more conversation, or the guest is feeling like they want to be asking the therapist more questions or anything like that, they still have that 25 minutes of time before their next service. So it really just allows everyone the time that they need. And then the guest really gets that 15 minutes of hands-on time. And I think that's really important too, because I think more than ever, people are needing it so much. They really, really need that focus and attention, and feel like they're in a safe environment at the same time.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Simon, I come to you with the same question. How are you handling your appointment books in this current time?
Largely the same as Deirdre. I think, one of the things that, as we sort of confronted the demands of cleaning the rooms and getting them turned, one of the critical pieces was really understanding that there's also an emotional break that folks need between services, right? And I think it's so easy to become so focused on either the economics or the operational demands that we lose sight of the emotional demands required of, especially initially upon returning to work, and being, either in a mask or maybe not used to the physicality of, doing the number of services that people are used to today, and the intensity of the environment. So I think there's, for us, I think that was also a critical component to identify in terms of the efficiency of the booking, is also the human component.
And are you adding the additional time between the treatments for that? Oh.
Yes. Yeah, built in for each of the services.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Jim, I have the same question for you. How are you handling those appointments in your spas right now?
So again, 3rd time's the charm. It's very, very similar. And I would add on to what Simon said about the energetic rest that the extra time brings. There's also a little bit more physical rest. And so they're being ready energetically and physically for the next guest. We've seen a difference in what this is all about. So our services are 60 minutes. There was a 15-minute break in between. We've added an additional 15 minutes for the room to rest and for everything everyone said, and just for that person to kind of reconnect with themselves. And it also has helped with the social distancing of things as well. Previously, the if you would, the hour and 15 minutes part of the fee for service, that was all included in compensation. The additional 15 minutes per service, we've now added a small amount in compensation to reflect that. That's been another big win-win for our therapists.
That's great. That's great. How did you figure out that compensation for the therapist in terms of the additional 15 minutes?
So there is an hourly training rate that we have. 15 minutes of that is, so depending on how many services you have, it's a small amount, but it still was recognized as additional compensation for an additional effort. So if you had 4 services, you have an hour's worth of additional training wage compensation.
Very interesting. Deidre, you're shaking your head. Yes, Deidre. Are you in the same process in Canyon Ranch?
No, I just think that's just that's just a great idea. Just love that. Because I think it's a topic as we continue to open up more of these spas that's going to come up. And I think they congratulations, Jim. I bet you they feel really great about that.
It's such, why we say we're weaving this fabric, right, of social connection, whether it's with our guests and our team or our team and our team. And when people heard that, it was like, wow. And it wasn't how big it was, but it was that somebody thought of it and they cared enough to acknowledge the extra work that somebody did, but that they were going to be compensated for.
Yeah, it's great.
So
that's very smart. I think it's also maybe a bit forward thinking of how the business itself will adjust as we move through this time. We're all learning together. So I think that's a great thinking point for me. I'm sure for all of us the call today. Allison, anything to add to the booking, the appointment booking and scheduling piece, or are you consistent with the other three panelists?
Consistent. And I think, Jim, again, I'm going to take that back to our national team. I think that's a great idea. I think the world is changing and we have to, again, think in terms of how can we support our teams best. So that's great. The only thing that pre-COVID we did, part of our training is we've always said no more than 2 appointments should be scheduled at the same time. Again, to really optimize the guest experience and the guest journey and giving that divided time to that guest. And so we went to 1, unless it was a couple coming in together. So it was 1 appointment and we would stagger 10 minutes. So that really helped from a cleanliness perspective, social distancing perspective, and just, again, not to really detour from the guest journey and the experience. So I think we've left that now as things progress to the owner and how we can better do that. But I think that in any case scenario, when you're really trying to deliver the experience, just to make sure you're paying attention to the scheduling.
Great, that's great. I think that gives the guest a peace of mind if they don't feel like they're being hurt, 200, 300 guests at one time.
Right.
It's great if you can space out those appointments for the guest perception at least. I think it's really important. I want to switch gears just a little bit. So we've talked about the reservations process. The guest has checked in. We've taken their temperature. Are we all taking temperatures? Can I have a thumbs up if you're taking temperatures at your desk? And Deirdre, do you want to talk about the temperature taking piece?
The hotel takes temperatures of all guests that come in and all team members. So, I guess we're, lucky because we don't have to do that. So it's already basically being done for us. And even somebody, that comes over from next door and comes into the hotel there's only so many points of entry and everyone goes through thermal scanning that way.
It's a thermal scan, not a gun or a under the tongue old school thermometer.
Yeah, it's a big machine that's actually attached to the ceiling, and people just walk by it all day long, and there's people sitting there watching it. Mm-hmm.
Understood. And Simon, I didn't see your thumb go up, so I'm assuming that you're not taking temperatures either.
Not in the spa, right? So it again varies by property, but not in the spa.
Are you doing any kind of thermal scanning for the guests when they come onto the property? Is it happening at that point, or not at all? This particular.
On the property, yes, but not necessarily in the spa. So, again, since we're a closed property, you don't have a lot of folks coming in to just use the spa. So we have an opportunity in advance to do all the screening process and limit the risk through temperature in that venue.
That's great. We're doing the thermal test with the handhelds on every guest who comes for a spa service. So they've checked in. We either have or we have not taken their temperature. They have the locker room to change. What happens in the actual treatment? So the massage therapist, we'll talk about massage therapists right now, and I'll come to you, Allison, on this first. The massage therapist picks up the guest. What is that process now between the guest and the therapist as they're going to the treatment room, and what happens in the treatment room between the guest and that therapist?
Again, a little variance in terms of what they can and can't do, but the process in terms of the experience is the same. You know, welcoming the guest. We have corner units that have, you know, Himalayan salt lamp and candles and the whole shebang. But there's also a little marketing piece that they can review, that the sanitation is very clear, so that if they want to spritz the table themselves or their hands, you know, they are offered that opportunity to do additional. They discuss what's going to happen, the mask process, you know, if they are face down, again, in some locations, they can, you know, pull it down so that they can breathe. And when they're face up, then the mask is on. But in general, the process and the journey itself is the same. If they aren't able to use our retreat areas, the one thing that we've asked the guest advisor to do, especially if it's a new guest, is to take them on the whole journey as if they were going to participate and be a part of it, but something to look forward to, and explaining, unfortunately at this time, our mandates don't allow the use of certain amenities. But in that process, it's all really well. I think the journey itself is intact, and the treatment itself is intact.
The treatment, and have you modified any of your treatments because of what's happening right now? And are you massaging face, scalp, hair at this point?
Only, again, it depends on the jurisdiction. Everything is so different by jurisdiction. It's crazy. I mean, I've learned so much about local government, probably way more than I wanted to, but it really is dependent on that jurisdiction. There's some that can, there's some that can't. So I guess we're all over the map in that process.
Understood. Thank
I
you.
know. Sorry. I wish I had more detail on that.
And we all have to listen to what the laws in our respective areas say.
Absolutely.
What we can and cannot touch. That's very important. So Deidre, I can you with the same question. They've checked in. They've been scanned at the front doors of the Venetian. How is that experience changing when they pick up the guest and get into the treatment room for the massage therapist? How is that changing?
Really, the only thing that's different is that we're asking them to wash their hands, explaining the process. If they need Kleenex or sneeze or cough or anything like that, we're going to put some hand sanitizer in their hands and ask them to sanitize their hands. But the journey is pretty much the same. We have lounge attendants, so the lounge attendant actually hands off the guest to the therapist, which makes it nice too for distancing. So we don't have a bunch of therapists wandering around trying to find their guests. So that makes a difference. But other than that, the journey is the same. And again, they have that time, so they can take as much time as they need to answer any questions for the guest.
And are you doing a health questionnaire with each guest at this point, or no?
You're not. Nope,
You're not.
you're not.
Okay. Okay.
Just the normal, you know, asking of questions, but not anything related to COVID.
And what was your thought process behind not having a specific COVID questionnaire?
People don't tell the truth. You know, they get questions when they come to the hotel. There's something that they sign. They've been scanned. We just didn't feel like, you know, it was necessary to do any more than what's already been done.
And I'm sorry, this is a little off topic. This is very interesting to me. So were your therapists comfortable with not having a more formalized questionnaire for their guests?
Yeah, the team's been really good. They haven't had any issues with that. I think they feel really good about the sanitation and the PPE that we have in place for them. And so I think that they've been totally fine. And, you know, they can obviously ask any questions about medical, but there isn't a list of questions that they're asked. Now, the resorts are different. The resorts are going to be calling their guests 3 days before they arrive, asking them a list of questions.
Do you have... And I think I'm going into this with you a little bit because I think it does impact the guest experience. So do you have preset questions for them to ask? And if there is an answer yes in the affirmative to a particular question, is that a reason to stop the service? How are you coordinating that so that the questions are effective and making them feel protected in the room?
So absolutely, at any time they know they can, if they don't feel comfortable or something, or if even someone feels like they're feverish or something, they absolutely can end the service, have the guest get dressed, and we'll talk to the guest. We haven't run into that yet, but they absolutely can do that. In the resorts, they're going to be calling the guests 3 days ahead of time and just go over the list of questions about COVID, and then there's a whole protocol in place if they've answered yes to any of the questions that we're going to be asking ahead of time. And they'll be like Simon at the resorts, they are temperature checked when they get there, but they're not being temperature checked in the spas.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I think it's really important because I think some spas are doing questionnaires, some aren't. And I think it's important that we have a window into both worlds. So at Montage, we do questionnaires and we use that as a process to really understand who that person is in front of us and their current situation. I'm glad to hear from you that you have found another way to access that information without a formal writing out of a questionnaire in advance. That's very helpful. So Simon, I come to you with the same question. Has the experience within the treatment room shifted for you in an appreciable way since COVID-19?
Yeah, and I think my answer, much like Deirdre, you know, the intention is that the experience is intact. What we've really tried to focus on is, you know, giving the guest some semblance of choice. I think one of the things that's important for folks to be able to have a sense of control, especially during this period where there is, in essence, a limited control or absence of control. And I think, and the choice doesn't come in terms of the level of prevention, but it comes in, I can explain to you all the steps that we've taken. I can talk to you a little bit about what we're going to experience and the steps we're going to take to mitigate risk, or we can enjoy the service and I can basically you know, begin and leave the service as intended.
And this may be an anecdotal question. I don't know if you have an anecdotal number you can tell me, but what percentage do you think, or would you imagine, of your guests when they're in the treatment room are really asking those detailed questions around the sanitation piece and the steps we're taking to keep?
Very limited. Yeah.
Well, and you know, I think it's very important to point out that much of what we do pre-COVID was already very much what we're doing post-COVID,
right?
Keeping people and keeping our associates safe. So that was my question. If you're seeing a big spike in questions being asked about what we're doing to keep the guests safe in the room.
My sense is, Patrick, that may be something that becomes more prevalent. I mean, one of the things that we've seen is the initial wave of folks coming have very little to no concern. And I think as, you know, the population that has been a bit more hesitant begins to come into our spaces, my sense is that will grow. And those concerns will grow. We'll field many more specifics and questions and wanting to understand better.
Deirdre, you wanted to pop in on that one, Deirdre?
Yeah, I really think that the people that are coming right now, kind of like Simon said, I think that they've already made up their mind, that they feel good about coming and they trust where they're going. That's why I think there isn't a lot of questions. I think that they've made up their mind. That's what they're going to do, and they trust what's happening in the treatment rooms. And like you said, Patrick, I think also that, you know, it's interesting because we all were operating right before the shutdown, and I don't know about everybody else, but for my team, nobody was positive. So they were working without masks and all that before, and everyone was okay. I'm glad that everyone was okay, but I think because the sanitation was really already in place. I remember when we were writing the sanitation protocols for the spas, I was like, hey, I just want to remind everyone that we've been doing this all along. You know, this isn't new. This is just more sort of, you know, for a lack of a better term, in your face that we're doing it now. So I think that's an interesting point too, is that, you know, these spa companies, we've been doing this a long time, and we've been practicing sanitation for a long time and washing our hands.
Very true. It's very, very true. Jim, I have the same question in terms of your spas, if that interaction with the therapist in the room has shifted, or if you're seeing it be consistent across the board still.
Yeah, there's really no difference because the guests are so preloaded with information that they don't need to do it in the treatment room. And if anything, I think people are looking for how to connect because we can't hug. And so we talk, and it's perfect because with your mask on, The only thing you can hug now is your eye hug. And so we talk about that a little bit, and it's a fun connection. So it's a, what do you mean an eye hug? And it says, let's look in my eyes, I'll look in your eyes, and we'll make that connection. So, you know, there's some treatments that we're not doing because there are so many pieces, like hot stones, for instance. We're not doing them. Too many things to clean and sanitize. We're not doing couple services because, you know, it's enough that you have 2 people so close, but 4 people in the same room, you know, and things like that just are kind of counterintuitive to all of this.
Jim, can you talk about, we've talked about massage a little bit. Can you touch on the skin care? Are you using steam? Are your therapist in the visors and the mask, which I think we all know have to be worn together at this point? Are you offering extractions? So how is that guest experience from the facials perspective in your spa?
So yes, we're offering facials, and the therapist has to wear a mask and a shield because the guest obviously can't. We're not doing extractions and those kind of things. But one of the questions we get all the time is, why can't I just wear a shield? It's 2 different things. You say that we think we all know this, but the shield and the mask do 2 different things, and they are not, you know, one or the other. It's both of them kind of thing.
That's great. Allison, I see you shaking your head yes on the skin care.
Just, yeah, in agreement.
So, please,
I mean,
what's happening at your spa?
Well, I find it to be fascinating with, again, local jurisdictions on some full-fledged doing facials, not worrying about anything. We've always, we've got the face shield, the mask, no extractions, no steam, the warm towels, obviously you need, so thank God for our cabby units. But I think in totality, our estheticians are ready and they know how to do what they need to do. They are the professional. And, you know, one testament to just how important the facials are to the spa industry, I personally was trying to get into our flagship location, and the owner said, we have a very long waiting list. And I thought, okay, I guess I'll wait a little bit longer. But it really is a true testament to what we need and how willing our guests are to come back and experience something to make a difference and feel good about themselves.
I think to your point, I think Deidre alluded to this also, that the people we're probably seeing right now are the ones who've already made up their minds. We don't have to convince them. Yeah. The challenge is going to be what happens in 6 months when we're seeing more with their toe in the water that may be a little bit more anxious about what we're doing in our processes, which I think speaks to training, making sure we're constantly and reminding people, but having that to build that trust in the people who are coming to see us.
You know, Patrick, I wanted to make one note, and sort of goes back to guest perception and what they're hearing, what they're communicated with, and reading some of the reviews that come back through Google, especially, and their actual notation and acknowledgement of our cleaning process, that they're impressed by the cleaning process, but they comment on it. So even if it's not spoken then, it is something that I think the guests are aware. And I think it's important to just always keep that on the forefront, that we have to be so diligent about that cleaning process that it's not deterring from the guest experience, but it's just part of our DNA now.
I love that it's part of the DNA, and I think that's that sense of, I think luxury now is going to be cleanliness, and part of the DNA of service is going to be how safe, how clean, how adhering to these standards we are, which I think it's important, you know, that we have tools like our ISPA toolkit. I know that other companies have created guidelines, but those guidelines are really important to be the DNA, the new DNA of our industry. And I think that's part of the future. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you to talk about the future of the guest experience. So think about that. But for me, it's really about how do we ideate a new guest experience based upon extreme levels, and not extreme in a bad way, but very thoughtful levels of sanitation and cleanliness and disinfectation. Simon, I'm coming to you with the same question. What you're seeing on your end there at Miraval.
Yeah, I mean, the facials largely the same. You know, we've had with the shields as well as the masks, and I think that you know, as we've wrestled with things, including gloves as well. So as we wrestled with the compromises involved in the risk mitigation process, you know, I think it's, you know, our approach has been, we can always peel back some of these measures, but it is a very different proposition to all of a sudden introduce something. You know, and you know, the theory being that let's make informed decisions about what we can peel back based on what we see and what our guests are asking for, what our staff is telling us, and wait till we have some evidence before we begin saying that we don't need some measures or we can do less. So I think that's sort of governed our process thus far.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So Deidre, I'm going to come to you on the checkout process. So we've had a massage, we've had a facial, and then is that checkout for you cashless? How is that happening? How are you handling, the big question is, how are you handling the retail sales in a world where people are afraid of touching things right now?
You know, it's interesting because of course we're forecasting, right, our budget for the rest of the year. Talk about throwing darts at a dartboard, everyone, right? And so it's been interesting because our retail is actually at budget, what we budgeted for the year in this month. So retail has been great. There's been no issues. Of course, we've done all the things of taking the samples out and all those things. And I know that I'm sure that the vendors, and a shout out to the vendors, because I think they're just doing such a tremendous job for us, you know, front and back of house. So thank you to any vendors who are on the phone. But I think that they're probably going to go to end up doing individual samples of things. I think that's going to be a big shift we're going to see. Right now we're putting it in cups for people and things like that. So that really hasn't been an issue. As far as checkout, we actually check people in and out at the same time. So when you come into the spa, just because of the size of the spa and having two front desks, they check in and check out at the same time. It's not paperless yet. We have Book for Time and they're working on a system so we can do some type of kiosk or something where they don't have to. And I know that they're even working on something for checking in, people checking in and getting assigned a locker that they can just go to without any assistance from a locker room attendant. But so we're working towards that, but we're just cleaning, you know, we have the sanitized pens and the used pens, and they're constantly sanitizing. And the actual system in which they place their card is all of them, and you know, they do everything and sign, and then we just clean it between every guest.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. And Jim, the checkout process for your spas, how is that shifting at this particular point?
Again, it really hasn't, because we also do the check-in and check-out at the same time. But two other comments I wanted to bring back to this is we've actually, pardon me? We've actually seen an increase in retail, and that is a little bit of a surprise for us as well. But because we've been open since May, in May, we saw people who said, take that mask off, you're scaring me. Those to us were the really early adopters who had no fear at all. But in the last 3 weeks, because again, our window has been a little bit longer, and this is in both in Arizona and in Virginia, we have seen a dramatic increase in the PPE that guests are wearing and the absolute demand. So we have this great big, you know, testament of all the things we're doing. And they're saying, I saw that you didn't do this or didn't do that. And that's something that we can't get complacent with safety for the health and safety of our team and our guests. But there's been an increased level of emotion and a little, you know, pent up, I'll call it anger, frustration, that is something that we've had to really deal with, to be kinder than necessary with folks, to really get them to slow down and get back into the space that we're used to providing.
Jim, can I add to that?
Yes, Allison, please.
One of the things that we have done for our teams is we created an intranet, and I may have mentioned this before, for our team members, because what Jim just said is so profound. People are coming in with so many pent-up emotions, whether lack of communication, working from home, you know, 5 children, dealing with your husband 24/7, like myself, you know, it's just so much gets pent up. And we're dealing with things, especially with us being membership-based, kind of re-engaging at a level that they're really therapists, both on the aesthetic side and the massage side, and
Yes.
they are really helping them navigate. We've had guests cry on the table, staying in our retreat rooms for an hour, and it's probably the first time they've really had that time to think and recenter themselves. So we created an intranet for our team members whereby they can go and look for ways, whether it's therapy for themselves, yoga techniques, whatever it is. We are pulling resources together so that they have something to go to at the end of the day to really help fill their bucket back up, because they're taking so much on. So I just wanted to touch on that because I think it's so important as providers and as owners of our businesses to understand that the psyche is so profound to our teams, and
I'm sure
whatever we can do.
We hear it all the time. Oh, you're so lucky to live and work at a spa.
Mm-hmm.
And we laugh and we go, yeah, but you don't know the half of it. And so you have to walk your practice, because if you don't do that, then how are you going to take care? So I think that is a heightened sense of awareness across the board on guests and team and yourself.
I actually was at 2 new openings. Crazy to think that we had 2 new openings in the last month, but I was fortunate to be at both and train at both. And my number one message to them was, you need to take care of yourself and each other. And here are some ways to do it. And just being able to talk and communicate and kind of do the icebreakers and do things that were a bit uncomfortable, but then to see them at the end, knowing that now they have this team and this family to lean on, because they're all not going to come in with great attitudes every day. We don't know what's happening in their journey. So just very important that we continue to teach our teams to communicate and support each other and love on each other. And all of us, here we are really supporting each other. Now is the time more than ever that we need each other. So
this has been a pretty an inspiring conversation just now. I'm really getting pulled in here. But thank you all for your time today. I think one thing that I've taken away is that the guest experience really starts with the experience of the therapist in the room with that guest, and that they feel taken care of and safe. And I think something, Jim, that you said that I think we all need to hold on to is that as we continue to open, people are going to hold us accountable for what we say we're doing. And that's the sanitation processes, but also that guest experience. It has to be consistent with the promise that we've made. I want to thank you all for your time today. I also want to thank Eminence Organic Skincare and Body Bliss for their support also. We're going to pop up on the screen in just a moment to see if you've won our giveaway. The winners will be listed there. And if you've won, a member of the ISPA staff will be in touch with you with more details. I also want to say that finally, today's town hall was the last one on the schedule. However, we have begun a new ISPA series called Chats with Product Pros that take place on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. And these sessions will explore innovative new products, adaptations, and reopening ideas shared by ISPA's resource partners communities. So if you can join those, please go to experienceispa.com to join those as well. On behalf of our panelists, myself, and on behalf of ISPA, thanks again for your time. It's been a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you.
Patrick, thank you so much.
Good job, Patrick.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.